Hi there. You guys know the drill for this one. We're going to be attacking ESPN's darkest moments and going deep into the company's history and behind the scenes actions. ESPN's been a pretty shady company for decades in my opinion, and they've just keep getting away with horrible, unjust business models. So let's take a look at these. At the top of the iceberg is going to be more well-known events, but as we move down, it's going to get to kind of darker and more intense things. I put together my own iceberg, as always, so let's get to it, and I hope you guys enjoy. Let's explore ESPN. Tip of the berg. Jamil Hill hates Trump. Jamil Hill is a successful sports journalist who's done time for ESPN alongside many other impressive sports stations. If you guys remember the show His and Hers, it was kind of a time filler back in the day, but she was half of that. Unfortunately though, Hill also has a mouth that she sometimes can't filter correctly. It was September of 2017, and there wasn't much lead up or anything, just kinda out of the blue. Jamil Hill changed her life forever with a single Twitter tweet. The tweet outright called Donald Trump a white supremacist and pretty clearly showed Jamil Hill's political leanings. Now, this is going to come up a lot throughout the video, so I'm just going to address it now. People who work at ESPN are not allowed to be political or kind of show their beliefs in the public. ESPN's a sports network that's built off being sports 24/7, so when you're talking about purely politics, as they say, they really don't like it. And for that reason, Jamil Hill was suspended from ESPN for this. It wasn't because the company loves Trump or they were insulted that they had their feelings hurt about it or something. It's because she showed her political beliefs at all. It wasn't about which way she leaned. When you work for ESPN, you can't show these kind of political leanings, and you can argue that that's not fair, but you know what you're signing up for with a company like ESPN. Later on this iceberg, we'll get into some stuff that you really don't know you're signing up for when you work with ESPN. But Hill did receive some punishment. Miraculously though, this wasn't her only, or even her worst, amazingly out-of-pocket comment. We'll get to that later. Bias. I probably don't need to explain this one to a lot of you guys out there watching. If you scroll through the ESPN, SportsCenter, or any one of their social pages, you're gonna see LeBron, Aaron Judge, probably something saying that we're 3 years away from Super Bowl 60, get hyped. You know, you're not gonna see the Orioles getting coverage, or anything in the NHL really, and Lord knows you're not gonna see women's sports covered. Many despise this bias that the sports programming network shows, with them being the biggest sports conglomerate and you don't really know where else to get sports. This piece of the iceberg also sort of plays into the political bias within the company though. ESPN tries to stay unbiased, but they definitely tend to lean one way. This isn't like a political video, but it is heavily thought by the common population that ESPN leans slightly left, and they sometimes show it. Curt Schilling. Curt Schilling is a retired old pitcher for the Boston Red Sox who became an ESPN analyst after his career tail ended. But Schilling was one of many victims of the cancel culture, a couple more of which are in this iceberg. Schilling posted a tweet that, instead of maybe showing his political values too much, was just flat out making fun of transgender people. Instead of following it up like most people would though, maybe like a big apology or some weird excuse, no, Schilling doubled down and he memed on us. He dropped this interesting meme, and again, I'm not taking political sides here, so I'll just let this play out. You can think what you want of it, but ESPN didn't like it too much, and he was promptly fired for, obvious reasons. Again, no matter what your opinions are, you can't work at a multi-billion-dollar sports company and post something like this. And I think as a perfect fit for him, he's now commentating for extreme right political news stations. And I'm pretty sure he did take the old white supremacist route. Like, can you be a more basic racist? I could have guessed you were a white supremacist just by looking at him. Bad dude. Why rush why? The title of this one isn't necessarily saying why to rush, as much as me saying why rush for the job of sportscaster. Why? In the 2003 NFL season, ESPN made the interesting decision to bring on Rush Limbaugh as a sportscaster. And if you don't know who Rush Limbaugh is, he was a very popular and very conservative political figure who hosted his own show. The decision to bring someone who devoted their life to politics into the sports booth was an odd one, and it went about as you'd expect it to. Just a couple weeks into that 2003 NFL season, Limbaugh was calling a Philadelphia Eagles game. At the time, Philadelphia had one of the best young quarterbacks in the league, Donovan McNabb. But Limbaugh, who's appealed to racist white people his whole career, didn't feel McNabb was playing very well. And that's fine, he's a sportscaster, he's entitled to his own opinion. But it just had to be about race, didn't it, Rush?
I'm sorry to say this, I don't think he's been that good from the get-go. I think what we've had here is a little social concern in the NFL. I think the media has been very desirous that a black quarterback do well. We're interested in black coaches and black quarterbacks doing well. I think there was a little hope invested in McNabb, and he got a lot of credit for the performance of this team that he really didn't deserve.
This one's bad, but how did they not see this coming? This is Rush Limbaugh. Didn't they watch Family Guy?
It's a paradise, Brian. Trees grow from Republican sod, and everyone prays to a proper right-wing god.
Underwater. He could go all the way to jail. This is a play on the iconic Chris Berman phrase,
"He's gone. He could go all the way."
Berman's a beloved sports announcer who had so much energy and charisma when he called games. But Berman also has a very shady past that we really don't know the whole truth about. In 2015, a former ESPN makeup artist accused Berman of making unwanted sexual advances towards her over text message. The sexual harassment claim was said to be settled by ESPN from within, and the company said the harassment claims had zero evidence or merit. By settle from within, though, many think that ESPN just kind of blew this case off in order to keep one of their top anchors out. As the sports world started to flip, though, and cancel culture came through, Berman was removed as a lead broadcaster. He still contributes within the company, but no one wants his face being seen anymore. Colin Coward's boot. I don't know if any of you ever watched Colin Coward's talk show, The Herd, but my god, it may have been one of the most boring television shows of all time. By talk show, I mean he literally sat there and he talked. And that was all. Just a guy sitting in his chair talking for a full hour program. It was honestly hard to watch. And it was especially hard to watch in mid-2015 when Colin would have an unforeseen and abrupt ending to his entire show. On one live episode, Coward was referring to baseball's complexity and how he thought it was a pretty simple game. His reasoning? That a third of the game was from the Dominican Republic. Did Colin just say that baseball is simple because a lot of Dominican guys play it and therefore it can't be complex? Colin, you can't say that, Colin. After backhandedly stating that Dominicans were not smart, Coward didn't even get to play out the rest of his show's contract. He got one more episode off the next day before being booted from ESPN for good. Jamil Hill also hates the Celtics. Okay, so you remember Jamil Hill, the reporter who got a little too vocal with her Trump hate? Well, if you thought maybe that wasn't too bad, she's just expressing her opinion. She's not actually a bad person. That's fair, yeah. Like, what she said wasn't insanely terrible or anything. But let me change your mind real quick. Because this time, none of you are going to agree with her. And it was pretty insanely bad. Before she was ever suspended for her Trump comments, Jamil Hill wrote a piece that probably should have gotten her fired. The article was titled, "Deserving or Not, I Still Hate the Celtics." And it's an opinion piece, so go off. There's no issue with that title. What there may be a slight issue with is her connection that, quote, "rooting for the Celtics is like saying Hitler was a victim." Okay, I'm sorry, I have to.
Boy said, fuck T.I., fuck Nelly, fuck 50. I'm like, what do you say fuck me for?
But yeah, some people may call relating Celtics fans to Hitler defenders a bit of a stretch. But somehow she was only suspended for this, not fired. See, my working theory here is that if she had made these mistakes in a different order, if she had called Trump out and then made the whole Hitler comparison, she would have been fired. But it would have honestly looked a little off on ESPN's part if they let her stay for Hitler comments and then fired her for saying stuff about Trump. Even if it was her second offense, it just doesn't look that right. Into the darkness. Ashley Madison leak. For anyone unfamiliar, the Ashley Madison leak was a huge data breach of a dating website. The website Ashley Madison was designed for married people to be able to sign up and secretly have hookups promoting extramarital affairs. And this idea obviously didn't sit well with a lot of people, and a group of hackers got to work. They breached the affair's website data and literally just released every person's information who had ever created an account, outing their names, emails, and IP address. Basically, if you had created an account, there was no hiding, you were done for, as the entire world could swift through all of these gigabytes of data. This all took place in around 2015, and by now, there's websites where you can literally just search and find anything you want from the leak like it's its own search engine. It's pretty wild. But how does this have anything to do with ESPN? Well, after a closer look at the data, an astonishing 101 different ESPN employees had active Ashley Madison accounts, including highly influential producers, vice presidents, and more. ESPN in 2015 had about 4,000 total employees, and I just can't wrap my head around the fact that 2.5% of employees for a worldwide sports conglomerate were all having affairs on the same cheating website. Like, were there monthly company memos going on about this? But what may be the funniest part about all of this is that 39 of the 101 accounts were created using their ESPN work emails. I mean, have some common sense. Like, I'm not buying my Brazzers subscription with my school email. Come on, just think things through now. But yeah, ESPN as a company just got destroyed from this whole leak, and I would usually feel bad for people getting hacked, but if you're cheating on your spouse, it's kind of karma to me. Mike Tirico. Mike Tirico has a reputation for being one of the most versatile broadcasters in the game. He calls everything from basketball to golf for ESPN, and he's highly respected in the booth. Outside of the booth, though, Mike Tirico has the reputation of an absolute creep. This is starting to get into not just ESPN's awful employees, but the lengths the company will go to cover up their stars. I want to take this moment to shout out a book. Mike Freeman's ESPN, The Uncensored History. It's probably the most informative account out there about this kind of stuff. It goes a lot into the criminal behavior that goes on behind the scenes at ESPN, and it's in this book where I found out about Mike Tirico. According to the book, Tirico made life hell for multiple female employees during the 90s. In one instance, he tried picking up on a production assistant at a house party, and he made her so uncomfortable that she left the party. But on her way out, there was Mike Tirico, blocking her car from exiting. When he approached her, he tried to jam his hand in between her thighs. Seems like a great guy so far. On another occasion, he emailed, texted, and virtually stalked another employee by telling her that he really wanted to sleep with her. One evening, he followed her home from a bar, causing her to report him to ESPN. And once reported, at least 6 other known women came forward against Tirico. And this is all disgusting. He's clearly a bad guy, but none of it is even the worst. This is an ESPN iceberg, not a Mike Tirico iceberg. And after finding out that multiple women he had harassed within their own company, ESPN did kind of exactly what you'd expect them to. A light suspension punishment, and Tirico is back in the booth. The slap in the face that this was to the victims, the fact that they ignored all of the women and just put Tirico right back, it's sickening. This is the first of many cases of ESPN going out of their way to cover up terrible behavior and to protect themselves, not lose money, really. And sadly, the decisions often seem to come down to gender and race. No maternity leave. So, you see how ESPN will completely disregard the complaints and feelings of women in their own company, even when they're reporting sexual harassment. Well, let's continue on that train of female discrimination within ESPN, because I promise there's plenty more of it. The environment for a woman at ESPN has been described by those women as hostile, toxic, and sexist. And it's really not a good thing when there are women walking around the building having to hide pregnancies from their bosses. Why would you ever have to hide a pregnancy, you may wonder? Well, because you're probably going to lose your job if you take maternity leave. Most companies will give a mother around 8 weeks of paid leave when she has a child, and ESPN does this too. The only difference is that female anchors have often found themselves laid off right when they come back to work or right after telling their bosses about a pregnancy. A number of female employees have been moved to less than desirable positions or just fired while on maternity leave. John Skipper. John Skipper was the president of ESPN and a chairman of Disney Media as a whole. This guy was just about as high up as you can possibly get in the sports and media world. But in 2017, the 27-year tenured Disney employee, who wasn't very hated, stepped down out of nowhere from his positions. It kind of caught the whole world off guard, but what was truly shocking was the reason. The 62-year-old married father of two cited a cocaine addiction for his reason for stepping down. All I'm saying is, how many 62-year-olds do you know that are running ESPN and consistently doing coke? He was in some sort of shape here. Skipper actually has a pretty interesting journey with drugs from working at Rolling Stone in his youth. It didn't even seem to be a normal addiction, and he said he wasn't really a daily user, and he never even did it while working at ESPN. Cocaine was like the ultimate side hobby for this already successful businessman. I'll leave a link to Skipper's interview in the description for more on his drug world life and battles. Spooky stuff. Erin Andrews. Erin Andrews is a name you likely recognize as one of the biggest sports reporters in the game, and she's a common face on many ESPN shows. And this Iceberg piece about her is nothing anywhere near her fault. In 2008, during her coming up as a reporter, Andrews had a full-blown stalker following her around on assignments from ESPN. It came to a climax that year when she was checked into a hotel by herself. A man, Michael David Barrett, requested a room right next to Andrews, and for some reason, he was given that. He carved a peephole into the wall, and he recorded Andrews naked in her room, posting the video online. That sicko only got 2.5 years, but Erin luckily won a $55 million lawsuit for having to go through any of that terror. Ingrained racism. It's been long accused of ESPN that the company has racist values of sorts ingrained within their philosophies. One anonymous ESPN producer advised their own African American colleagues to leave the company if they wanted to further their career, as the producer had seen so many people get passed up for spots seemingly due to race. We can go all day about racist actions and little hints of racist bias that have happened within the company. It's honestly sad that nothing's ever been done about it. Aside from those 2 books I talked about, there's such little information even out there about it. There's so little consequences being handed out, even though it's pretty clear a lot of the people at the top of ESPN are pretty corrupt and scummy people. Rachel Nichols jealous. Rachel Nichols was a common face on ESPN, hosting The Jump all the way until just over a year ago when she was let go. This firing would have been a massive shock and a huge hit to her on-the-come-up career. That is, if it wasn't for a leaked tape of Nichols that released to the media. In the tape, she went off on fellow ESPN reporter Mariah Taylor. Taylor, who's also a female reporter in the same area as Nichols, happens to be African American. And Nichols went off in this recording about how Taylor was only getting all these jobs and rising fast in her career because of her skin color. She accused ESPN of trying to make their diversity record look better by replacing her with Taylor. But honestly, I think that ESPN was just trying to replace Rachel with Mariah Taylor because she's a better reporter and they want her as their main NBA reporter. I also doubt Mariah Taylor would get self-conscious and racist in this situation too, so seems like they made the right choice. But after this, The Jump, which was one of the best shows on ESPN, especially basketball shows, was canceled. And that sucked because I love this show. I will say, I did not love this show at all because of Rachel Nichols, and I think they should have tried to continue it without her. They didn't need her. She kind of played the middle mediator role, if you know what I mean. Nichols was fired for good from ESPN for this one, though, kind of in this new era of 2021 where that stuff wouldn't pass like it may have used to. Sexist coverage. I don't need to tell you guys that ESPN likes to cover men more than women. I mean, a quick scroll through their social medias will do the trick. And I'm not blaming ESPN for this or saying it's a bad thing. The argument can be made that they shouldn't be advertising that stuff because it's not as popular and they're just doing what people like. Regardless, this isn't my opinion on that, rather me bringing the issue to the front that this gender imbalance is there. Have your own opinions on what it means or if it's bad, but beside the follower count, I mean, look at the difference in editing and effort put into the ESPN and ESPNW pages. I'm just pointing this stuff out. 2015 Courage Award. The ESPYs are the yearly award show that ESPN hosts, and in 2015, the Courage Award for the show brought on some intense controversy. The winner was Caitlyn Jenner for her bravery in coming out as a transgender after being a dominating male sports figure for decades. Once again, I'm not here to debate who deserved the award, but rather bring the controversy to you guys. People weren't necessarily upset about Jenner winning the award, but rather the competition she managed to beat out. Some other names that people thought deserved attention were Lauryn Hill and Noah Galloway. Hill was a female college basketball player who had recently passed away after inspirationally playing through terminal brain cancer. And Galloway, a double amputee and motivational speaker war veteran, had recently competed on that year's season of Dancing with the Stars, competing literally without an arm or a leg. The bottoms. Jen Sturger's career. Jen Sturger was a beat reporter for the New York Jets, and she wanted to push her career further as a journalist. To do this, she made the unfortunate mistake of getting a job at ESPN as a woman. And what came of Sturger's new job was the worst field trip you've ever heard of. Here goes. Field trip location, a strip club. People on the field trip, all men and Jen Sturger. Activities on the field trip, the men all getting lap dances. But oh, don't worry, it gets worse. Sturger was teased and belittled by her superiors for not choosing to interact with them, we'll say. She sat there awkwardly, never having been in a strip club in her life. The cherry on top, though, Sturger was fired before her plane even landed back home. ESPN claimed to investigate and said they didn't know anything about the issue, but, well, you already know what came of it. No one was fired, no one was in trouble, and the horribly shady criminal company continues their malpractice business ways up to today. I don't know if law enforcement doesn't care. Maybe they're scared of ESPN. They don't know if they can beat them, or they know they can't beat them. But I don't understand how the people at the top of the sports world keep getting away with this kind of stuff. It's sick. Not that Robert Lee. This one's honestly a little comical and just such a mindless and stupid decision that ESPN made. I'm sure they think the same thing after it with hindsight and all. In September of 2021, amid much controversy, a statue of Civil War figure Robert E. Lee was removed because of his ties with racism. This angered a lot of people, especially in Charlottesville, Virginia, where the statue was taken down. The area was a main southern state in the Civil War, and there's definitely some white supremacists still lurking around there, yada yada yada. But completely separate from the whole political side of things, the University of Virginia had a football game planned that weekend. And completely out of coincidence, ESPN had assigned a reporter to cover that game by the name of Robert Lee. The reporter just happened to share a name with the same Civil War general from the 1800s. And for whatever reason they thought of, ESPN didn't let Robert Lee call the game. They reassigned the poor kid and he got booted from the head announcer role of the game. If it's not dumb enough that he got booted for sharing a name with a man who died in 1870, this is Robert Lee. Robert Lee is an Asian American. Robert Lee has no connections to the Confederacy. I didn't think this was a distinction that we had to make, but this Robert Lee is this Robert Lee. Sarah Phillips. Sarah Phillips was an Oregon State graduate who landed a prestigious job out of college with ESPN. And this time it's not ESPN screwing over the woman, but the woman screwing over innocent people. Even worse, innocent meme page runners. It was 2012, and Sarah was running her gig as a blogger for ESPN. That's when she approached the admin of the NBA Memes Facebook page, an enormous page that dominated basketball memes on social media. She offered the admin of the page a job to work with her on an upcoming project with ESPN. This project did not exist, and after he agreed, Sarah started pretending to work with him, but there was just one issue. The NBA Memes page had some illegal content that had to be taken down in order for them to work with ESPN. Sarah asked for the login information, got it, and like a 14-year-old on Fortnite, scammed the hell out of the NBA Memes Facebook page and took it all for herself. This confusing, unknown woman that ESPN weirdly hired was eventually let go. The scandal's an extremely interesting one, as there's rumored to be a number of other sports comedy pages that Sarah was trying to steal. Quite a story. Doug Adler lawsuit. Doug Adler was an ESPN tennis commentator who was fired for a pretty questionable comment he uttered, to say the least. Referring to star Venus Williams, Adler said the phrase, quote, "You'll see Venus move in and put the gorilla effect on, charging," end quote. Now, this one's a heavily debatable one, as Adler insisted that he was using the term gorilla with an E, referring to the attack-heavy warfare style, but others saw it as a racial term, calling Williams a gorilla, and Adler was fired from ESPN for the incident. Another one where I'll let you guys decide on it in the comments, but Doug Adler sure was not happy about it. He filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against ESPN, which went on to be settled in private manners.